the key bugle was developed around 1800. It was patented by James Halliday and later known as the Royal Kent Bugle. And the story is that at the end of the War of 1812, at the Congress, I don't know where it was, Congress of Vienna, wherever they signed the treaty, they had all of the best bands of all of the nations there. And the story is that the Coldstream Guards represented Great Britain, and in their band was a key bugle. And somebody said that it might be John Diston, the father of the guys who made the quintet. Anyhow, somehow somebody took this instrument to Jean-Hilaire Aste, known as Hallery, was a famous instrument maker, and a few years later patented an ophicleide. All right,
there it is.
You know, an ophicleide, right?
Right.
Ophicleide is nothing more than a big key bugle, right?
True.
So the idea is that he got the idea for a family of keyed brass instruments based on the soprano, which was the key bugle. All right, so we have one line that we have the keyed line that comes over. You guys know the chestnut brass group that plays those and other early brass instruments. There were small groups, probably quartets, that were playing keyed instruments in the United States after the War of 1812 and probably before the Mexican War, 1836. So that's one line. And of course, you know, there were some famous keyed bugle players, you know, Francis Johnson. All right. So the other one is comes out of the development of the valves. And you probably know those too. The Stölzel valve around 1818.
It's my understanding that Stölzel valves, you know, long piston valves where the air flowed in through the bottom of the tube casing, and then based on the position of the valve was essentially making 90-degree turns inside the instrument. So yeah, it was very not ideal flow of air through the Stölzel valve design.
And then a German bandmaster by the name of Wilhelm Wieprecht. Do you know that name? You should know that.
Yeah,
Sounds familiar,
he developed one of the other valves, right? He did the Berliner pumping valve.
Yes, absolutely. So, and also was part of the invention of the tuba, along with Moritz. So he's a clarinet player, a trombone player, and a violinist, and he's in the court orchestra in Berlin, but he's also interested in military bands and starts one of his own. And he starts fiddling with the instrumentation. He starts studying acoustics. And so he comes across the Stölzel valve, and the Stölzel valve was first put on French horns. And there's some acoustical problems with it. And so they began, along with, I think probably Moritz, to develop this Berliner Pumpen, which is a fatter, shorter valve, but where the flow through, air flow through is much better than the Stölzel valve. So he adds these Berliner Pumpen valve to his brass instruments, and he develops a family of instruments. And of course, sax does a family of instruments too. And they're sort of developed about the same time. Interestingly enough, sax uses the Berliner Pumpen valve on his instruments. You know, the Perronnet valve, which is the modern valve that we all use, was developed almost at the same time. But sax had all of the patents, and he had contracts with the military to produce their instruments. So Perronnet couldn't get his instruments used, and so we don't see them until later. So you have these two families, right? And they start becoming imported into the United States. People start playing them, and then of course we have the Dodworth, Alan Dodworth, supposedly invents the over-the-shoulder sax horns in about 1838. Mm-hmm. And so we've got upright instruments following the sax horn, and we have then the over-the-shoulder instruments following the Dodworth. Interesting, the Dodworth uses Berliner Pumpen, and then there was the American rotary valve. Let me see if I can find this. I've got some notes right next to me.
Of course.
I'm trying to remember the guy's name.
Wasn't that Allen?
No.
Not Dodworth, but I think his last name was Allen, wasn't it?
Thomas Paine.
Oh, okay.
Developed about 18. Let me see. He has the patent in 1848. Thomas Paine for the American string rotary valve. Now, Allen tried improving the valve by expanding the tubing where it entered and left the valve, so that when it joined the rest of the tubing of the instrument, it was broader. Gotcha. He tried to do basically for the rotary valve what Vprecht and Moritz did for the piston valve.
Makes sense.
So anyhow, yeah, so Allen's an important valve type, but most of the instruments from the Civil War period did not have Allen valves. They had the Paine valves.
Gotcha. Makes sense.